So for 5-4, we're gonna talk about rule breakers. So rule breakers, now we've been talking about Mendelian genetics, and remember Mendel kept voracious records, but if you remember me discussing it earlier, after he passed away, they cleaned out his residence and threw away all of his stuff. So what we know is what he has given us, and we still consider him the father of genetics, but we don't know if he knew about the stuff I'm getting ready to talk about. And so these are things that we discovered as a result of his, what we consider Mendelian genetics. Okay, but so these are rule breakers. So these are not going to follow necessarily what Mendel, and you'll see when we get into it what I'm talking about, what it follows. So rule breakers. We know, and Mendel didn't necessarily know this right away, but genes can be linked. They can be linked together, or they can be unlinked. Genes that are close together on a chromosome, they tend to be inherited together. For example, genes for red hair, genes for blue eyes, genes for freckles. They are like really close on the chromosome, and whenever the chromosome goes through, well, if you remember when we were meiosis and we were talking about crossing over, the chromosomes match up and then they switch, a portion of their top or their bottom or both, and they can really switch anywhere in the top or in the bottom. But if the genes tend to be close together, they're considered linked genes, and they will always, always, always be inherited together, like the three I just shared with you. And now unlinked genes are going to be kind of the opposite. They're going to be farther apart on a chromosome, not likely to be inherited together. If you look at the picture here, so this would be genes that are really close together. So this white and black streak, gene A and B, you can see that they're really close together. And when the chromosomes go through crossover, these will never seem to, they could be broken up, but it would have to be like right between them. And so what you're seeing here are looking at genes that are linked. Okay, and so if we looked at genes that are not linked, you can see that they are a little farther apart, and the more farther apart they are, the most likely they are to not be inherited together. Now, you're going to see this 5% or 5 map units. Now, remember, we're talking about, are they close together? So we're talking about a matter of distance, or are we talking if they're far apart? Still, it's a matter of distance. We use miles to give us a distance, a basic distance. And genetics, they use something called map units, okay? And so if I were to draw a chromosome, and let's say this is a chromosome, it'll start here at 0, and the maximum they can get is 50 map units. 50 map units. But you can see that these are relatively close. So they're within like 5 map units of each other. If you could draw that on there, let's say this is gene A, gene B might be that close. So if this were to trade sections, it might break there. And you can see that then those genes look linked. And then over here, we have 30 map units. So if I can erase these, so 30 map units would look maybe from 0 to here would be 30 map units. And then genes over here, they could be further away, so like A and B. So they're not really linked because they could probably be broken there and separated, just like we're seeing right here. Okay? Now this is where I'd ask you, are there any questions? Okay? So now I've got to set you up for the next one. So we know that if you're a male human being, you have sex chromosomes that are XY. If you're a female human or a cat or whatever, you're going to be an XX. So XY is male, female is going to be XX. Think of it as to have a Y is to be a guy. And so you have this makeup. Well, this is called the XY system. And there's two that you need to know. And we belong to the XY system. And really what's kind of important, we kind of already know the basics of this. You're in Bio 2, you understand a dad can give an X or a Y sex chromosome to his children. And so the male, the dad, is the person that determines the sex of the offspring. Because, think about it. A female can only give an X or an X, but a dad can give an X. If he does, then it's going to be a female. If he gives a Y, he's going to have a son versus an XX daughter. Okay, so that's one system. Okay, another system is kind of wacky and weird, but it's called the ZW system. And birds and even some amphibians, not some, amphibians, they display this ZW system. Very much like ours, except for the fact in this system, the female is the one that determines the sex and not the male. Because you can see like this rooster up here, he's going to give a dominant Z sex chromosome or a Z chromosome to either offspring, and then you get your female, she's going to give the Z or the W. And so this is why that female in the ZW system, they determine it. Now, that's going to set us up for something here in just a second. Now, sex-linked traits. And we got to understand, I think we understand the systems, but sex-linked traits, these are things that Mendel couldn't necessarily see, and maybe he did, but we just didn't know. Sex-linked traits are traits determined by genes found on sex chromosomes. Now keep in mind, you have 44 what's called autosomes, and we just call them body chromosomes, but we have 2 allosomes, which we just call the sex chromosomes. Okay, and so when we're talking sex-linked traits, we're looking at the allosomes, or the 2 sex chromosomes. And you're going to find that most of the sex-linked traits are going to be found on the X chromosome because it's just big. It's much bigger than the Y. There are a few on the Y, but it's so small that most of them are found on the X chromosome. So here's one, male pattern baldness. And so you can see that pattern there. That guy has a receding hairline. He may go entirely bald on the top of his head. That's called male pattern baldness. And usually this is what's called an X-linked recessive trait. And so in order to have this, you got to have 2 recessive alleles for this. And so in this case, the A would be normal hair, and the lowercase a would be recessed hair. Recessed hair. Excuse the spelling. Okay? And so in order to have it, you got to have 1 recessive or 2. In this case, you're not going to see, it's very rare for a female to be able to get both of these recessive genes. This is rare. Most females are here and here, and I think back on my life, and I can't remember seeing any female that I've ever known or ever noticed seeing that had a receding hairline like this up here. That's usually just a male. Okay? And so think about it. Here, in order for a female, she's got to be able to get 2 recessive. It's really rare to have that happen. But a male, and if a male just gets 1 recessive, he's going to show this because he doesn't have another X over here with maybe a normal gene protecting him. And so if you have this genotype, this setup, you're going to have normal hair. I think I consider myself probably that. And then here, you're going to have that male pattern recessed. So this is why more males seem to be affected, because it's easier to get from your mom, your mother, the female. You're able to get that 1 recessed chromosome much easier. Okay? Now that's just an example. There's also one called color blindness, that red and blue color blindness, red and green, or I can't remember which one it is, but it shows this that it's also an X-linked trait. Now there are Y traits. This is one, and this is again found. You'll never find a female with hairy ears like this. This is just a Y-linked genetic trait, and so He received this trait from his father. He's going to pass it down to his sons if he has it. He's not going to pass it down to his daughters because his daughters don't have a Y. He's given them an X. But if he passes it on to his son, he might have that gene, whatever we give that, however we denote it through that. Okay. Now, last thing, rule breakers. There's 2 laws here. Okay. This is called the law of incomplete dominance. So the law of incomplete dominance, you know, this is a biological law. This is true as far as we can see. We can't ever change it. In Mendelian genetics, you know, there's a dominant and a recessive. But in plants, for example, there are multiple colors that are dominant just themselves. And so if we were to maybe do a Punnett square quick of flower colors, we'll do a monohybrid cross, and we'll take this A, R, better make that capital because that's red, A, capital R, and then we have an A, capital Y for yellow, and you can see they're both, and you know, you think about incomplete, I think we know what dominance means, but we go incomplete. And the best way I can do it, show you, is just do it like this. So we got A, R, capital Y, orange. And so you're going to look over here, capital A, R, they're all going to be orange, just like this picture right here. So capital A, capital R, capital Y, A, capital R. So they're all going to be orange here. Now, if you look at the color, it's not completely red, but it's not completely yellow. And so that's why it gets the name incomplete dominance. Okay, so this is something that Mendel may have known, but we may not know. Okay, so that's a law of incomplete dominance. Think of it as a blend of colors, because okay? No one is dominant over the other. Now, law of codominance. Now we see this in animals, and co means together. So together they're going to show, and you'll be able to see in certain cows, white is going to be a dominant color, and red is going to be a dominant color. And so if you have offspring, they're going to have what's called a roan offspring, which is going to be spotted, and you're going to see that both colors actually show. And so you can see it. So together they are going to show. Lost my train of thought, but that's the law of codominance. Codominance. Remember, co means together, so together they're showing.